What are the tips and tricks for using weblocks on highlines? And what are safety issues you need to watch out for? Check it out on this episode of How Not to Highline. Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks and welcome to my garage. Today we're going to talk about how to use a weblock upside down, how to get two weblocks to play well with each other by offsetting them, and we're also going to go over safety issues like slippage, how not to lose your finger, and how to check your balls. If you've only slacklined in the park, you're likely to have only used your weblocks in this orientation. But as soon as you add a backup line, you now have to have two weblocks on top of each other, one for each line. And since this is awkward, the main line is usually rigged upside down. So let's go over how to install your webbing when your mainline weblock is upside down. Just like a standard use of a weblock, the tail comes out of the bottom, and this would be my backup line. But the main line, if you're going to have your weblock upside down, instead of having your webbing bent like this, you're going to flip it over upside down, and then you're going to go around the diverter, and it's going to look like this in your weblock. So now that I'm all done, I have my main line coming out here and the tail coming out here, just like the picture shows on the weblocks. Make sure that it's still orientated the way it's supposed to be, and you can even check by holding it right side up. But you take the tail and it comes off that side. You take this other weblock, and the main lines come out this way, and your tails come out the top and the bottom. And they sit quite nicely with each other. Now that we have our two weblocks orientated correctly, it doesn't sit well like this, so my preference is to move the main line back a little bit and offset them so they're not hitting each other. One option is to use two different length soft shackles. If you use soft shackles as your main connectors, you can have a short one and a long one. And then when you put them together, it can shake and bounce around and hit on top of each other. And if my thumb was the master point, they are offset perfectly. The second option would be to combine a normal shackle with a long soft shackle to where if my hand was the master point, they're still offset from each other and they're not hitting each other. And your third option, if you'd like to use normal shackles for both weblocks, is to extend the bottom one with a continuous loop. You can put the continuous loop directly on the weblock or the master point. In this example, if you put the continuous loop directly on the weblock, it goes through the eye, you fold it in half, and then you put your shackle through the loops, and it extends it out. So when you put the two together, you have your two shackles on the master point, and your two weblocks aren't hitting each other. If you want to put the continuous loop on the master point, you put it on the shackle, you go around your master point, and you put it back on the shackle, creating a loop, and then this would go on your weblock. The real benefit for putting the continuous loop on the master point instead of through the eye of the weblock is that you don't have two shackles competing for space up here. So when you have it all set up, you don't have anything clashing while the webbing is moving. A fourth option would be to use a soft release setup. If you have a soft release setup in the system, it puts your main line out further than your backup line, which is not a big deal, but it does prevent your weblocks from crashing into each other, which is what we're trying to prevent here. It makes for a good option. Warning, webbing can slip, especially high-tech webbing and especially when it's loose. It's been a real problem posted on Slack chat lately of people finding their webbings are sliding out from under them as they're highlining. That's a problem. So you go through the weblock, and instead of just putting your eye through here, you would go through the diverter one more time, the back of the weblock, then take your eye and put your pin through that. And that is double wrapped, and that won't slip. Warning, tie off your tails. You don't know if you installed it backwards in the weblock, if the pin was put in right, or the webbing could slip. It's always important as a redundant backup to tie off your tails. To tie off your tail, you take a big bite of webbing, and in this case I'm going to go through the eye of the weblock 4.0 because it's big, or you can go through the master point. But you're going to pull this all the way through, and you're going to tie off a mule knot, which is more or less a overhand knot, but you go around stuff while you do it. Cinch that up, and I like to go around 3 times to make sure it's really secure. 2 and 3. Then I like to take a carabiner, preferably locking, and clip this to a master point, a bolt, or something else. Make sure that your webbing still looks straight and that you haven't twisted any of these because you don't want this obstructed in any way. Now, worst case scenario, if you were to maybe have the pin come out, or it was installed backwards, or it slips, you're still connected to this beautiful anchor that you've built in this web lock. This is not ideal by any stretch of your imagination, but it's better than not being connected at all. Back up your tails. Warning, your finger is not as strong as this pin. Don't use it as a temporary pin while you try to feed this eye through to hold it open. You don't know what could happen with the line or tension or wind, or if your partner decides to pull a little slack in thinking you're done. Instead, it's better to take that eye, flip it over, then set your pin in there, and then grab it, always keeping your hands open and making sure you don't have any twist from flipping it around. But this way, I did not have my finger in there at all while I was inserting it. Warning, check for twists. Twists can come from high lines being loose or while you were pulling and not being careful to guide it through. You lose a lot of strength when there's a twist in your webbing. Warning, check your balls. Make sure that you can see these balls after you push the pin through. I have on numerous occasions come across a high line. After inspecting, I saw that my web lock pin was only partially through. So when you are done, make sure that you've shoved it all the way through so you can clearly see your balls. Okay guys, make sure that your webbing is installed correctly when your web lock's upside down and that they're offset so they're not clanging around on each other. Also make sure that you double wrap your webbing so that it doesn't slip. Make sure there's no twists. Don't use your finger as a temporary pin. After all, you only have 10 of them. And make sure that you shove that pin all the way through so you can easily see those balls. And in case you fucked all that up, be sure to tie off that tail. Since there's 101 ways to screw up web locks, therefore, you shouldn't highline. Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks, and this was another episode of the How Not to Highline series. This is a guide for slackliners transitioning into highlining. We are not here to spoon feed the right rigging techniques. Instead, we hope to empower slackliners to critically analyze any system they're going to use. Risk awareness can keep people alive. Please don't rig your first highline without an expert. We have too many wonderful and generous people in our highlining community to go risk your life after watching some YouTube tutorial. Let's keep this sport safe. And remember, since no system is perfect, therefore you shouldn't highline. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.